Quando falamos de mulheres na aviação, lembramos-nos quase sempre da Amélia Earhart, a primeira mulher a sobrevoar sozinha o Oceano Atlântico. Mas também poderíamos falar de Maria de Lourdes Braga de Sá Teixeira, a primeira mulher a obter o brevet em Portugal. Corria o ano de 1928 e no dia 6 de dezembro, quando uma jovem Maria, de apenas 21 anos, fazia história. Tirou a carta de condução aos comandos de um avião Caudron G3. O seu instrutor foi o então capitão-piloto aviador Craveiro Lopes. Por este feito, a sua memória foi homenageada pela Câmara Municipal de Lisboa, não por um aeroporto, não por um aeródromo, nem sequer dando nome a um dos vários planos para o novo aeroporto da capital. Maria de Lourdes Sá Teixeira foi o nome dado a um jardim nas imediações do aeroporto Humberto Delgado. Eventos como este eram e são ainda, temos que dizer, noticiados exatamente por não serem assim tão comuns. A aviação sempre foi dominada por homens, desde os engenheiros que constroem o avião às personalidades escolhidas para dar nome aos aeroportos. Porém, não é só de evoluções tecnológicas que o setor é feito e têm sido dados importantes passos sociais que abrem as portas da aviação também às mulheres. Hoje a aviação mundial conta com cerca de 5% de mulheres a pilotar aviões, enquanto pelo mundo aumenta o número de mulheres em cargos de administração. E esta evolução significa obrigatoriamente a abertura de um setor moldado pelo olhar masculino a perspectivas novas, olhares diferentes e distintos. É sobre exatamente isto que se debruça o próximo painel, intitulado Gestão de Topo na Aviação, como superar barreiras de género. Ora, como aqui no Portugal Air Summit também gostamos de ironia, vamos seguir a tendência de tantos debates sobre temas femininos e passar a palavra a um homem. Para moderar o próximo painel recebemos, e muito bem, o jornalista João Maia Abreu. Boa sorte, João.
Obrigado, Catarina.
Entre mulheres. Boa sorte.
Então, obrigado. Vou chamar já as minhas convidadas para este painel. Começo pela Alexandra Reis, presidente da nave. Depois a Chloé da ANA, a Chloé Lapeyre, membro da Comissão Executiva da ANA Aeroportos. A Silvia Mosquera González, membro da Comissão Executiva da TAP Portugal. E a Tânia Cardoso Simões, da Autoridade Nacional da Aviação Civil, chairwoman da ANAC. Bem-vindas, welcome. We're going to be talking in English, so this panel will be in the English language. I'm going to move my chair a little bit here so that I can see everyone. And I'm going to start by asking Alexandra, in terms of your career and your perspective, looking back, what interests, what problems did you have in the progression in your career? What was the issue that most annoyed you?
Well, to be honest, I don't recall any specific situation. I studied engineering, electronic engineering, so I'm quite used to live in a world of men. We were 120 colleagues in the university and 20 women and 100 men, so I'm quite used to that environment. Then I worked in telecom, also a lot of engineers, a lot of men. Then in energy, a lot of men also. And in aviation, well, I think that Katerina said everything, 5% of women only flying the aircraft. So I'm quite used to that. I think it is challenging for a woman, but I also think it's important for women to adapt and speak for themselves.
Is it difficult, more difficult in the aviation area than the other ones that you've been?
I believe so, and why? Because it's a much regulated environment, right? The group, it's much more closed. While in telecom, you have people coming from all industries, and you feel that. In aviation, it's a much more closed group. Most of the people that work in an airline have been working in the industry some way. I was an outsider. It was something a little bit stranger for the company. Everybody that worked in an airport most likely had any kind of relationship with aviation. So the group, it's more closed, and because of that, it's more difficult. But I think that also women need to adapt. I remembered when I was studying engineering, it was the moment that I realized what is a offside in football, right? Because Monday morning I need to talk with someone, and all my colleagues were talking about Benfica and Porto. And if I want to have a conversation with someone, I will need to know what is a goalkeeper, what is a striker, etc., etc. So I think that it's also important for us to adjust to the language. Top positions are very few. So the competition...
You are very good representatives of
yes,
those achievements and goals that women can achieve.
Yeah. But competition is very high. If it is a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. Competition is very high. It's difficult to get to the top. And if women are always being disappointed because they didn't got the same opportunities, they need to go there, they need to fight for those opportunities. I think it's also very important for women to speak from themselves and also to do another thing, which is what we can do here. It's to work together, right, to make sure that women can foster other women, younger women, and together with each other.
Chloé, in terms of your perspective, in terms of what you believe should be, is this just a question of gender, or is it a question of leadership per se?
Yeah, I think there are some characteristics of leadership in the air transport sector that probably are not very gender-oriented. It's true that there has been a history in our sector that has been pretty much based on main occupied activities. But my feeling is that's already changing, and I think we are an example of it. It's totally by chance that we are 4 women, I hope, in this table, but I think this is already changing. The specificity of the leadership in our activity means to be passionate about it. You have to be passionate to be ready to deal with real-time situation, to deal with 24-hour activities, to deal with multiple stakeholders, multidisciplinary teams, to deal with very complex contingencies, with new challenges, sustainability, very visible in the media, in the public, big expectations, and also to be ready within this very real-time context to have a longer-term vision. And if you're not ready for that, I mean, it's a question of passion for all of us. And all the people I know, whether women or men in our activities, are people that are passionate, because aviation is a fantastic activity.
And how do you see it in the sector, and specifically in this area? How do you see it in terms of parity? Do you see a change in recent times? I know you've been through a lot of countries in the world, Cambodia and Greece. How do you see it now, today?
So obviously the situation is a little bit different,
yes,
or sometimes very
countries,
different from a country to another. In my personal experience, I've never felt that there was an obstacle in the fact that I was a woman. But I know it can be an obstacle just from our society, the fact that there will be less women, less girls choosing scientific syllabus, less girls encouraged to follow maybe careers that they see where as a man majority activity. So, but however, I really think there is a change coming. In ANA, we have in our directors 40% of women, a little bit less in management position. We are around 30% of position occupied by women in leadership position.
Is there been an evolution recently?
There is definitely an evolution.
In terms of management also, you were saying? Yeah,
in Lisbon, for example, all the leader operational positions are occupied by women, very strong and skilled women which have earned their recognition in the company. The deputy director of Lisbon Airport is a woman. In Madeira as well, there is a strong, very feminine leadership team. So yes, I really feel it's it's not a topic. The topic is more, what are really the skills to be able to occupy these positions?
So that leads me to Silvia. Silvia, at TAP, what experience do we have in terms of, is it feasible that we can understand that through the years there's been an improvement? We have a CEO of TAP is a woman, you, a member of the board, of course. Is there a change that you can perceive, and specifically in TAP?
Yes, I think so. But before, if I may, Joao, I would like to say thank you for the invitation to this panel. I'm very proud to be part of this panel with strong women. So, muito obrigada por lo convite. Now, going to your question. Yes, in fact, women are still underrepresented in the aviation industry. This is a fact. So, what we can do to improve these figures? We know that IATA launched a program in 2019. The name of the program is 25 by 2025. That means that they are expecting, the objective is having 25% of women in senior position in aviation by 2025. So I have to say that, in fact, in TIP today, we have more than this, because we have 45% of women in senior positions. And as you said before, our CEO is a woman. I have to say that this is the first time after 16 years in the aviation industry that they have a boss that is a woman. So if you look at the numbers of the industry, only 6%, there are only 6% of the airlines have female CEOs. So in TAP, this is very different, because not only Christine, our CEO, but also when you look at the executive committee, 60% are women. There are 3 women and 2 men in the executive committee in TAP. But TAP is not our representation of the industry, because the numbers in the industry are much lower. The average is only 10% in C-level position of women. So I think that this program that IATA launched, of course, can give us incentives to try to change this. So yes, during the last year, I think that we are seeing changes. In the last years, we are seeing more female CEOs, also in other airlines. So I think that this is changing. But how to change this? Because it's not easy. I think that it's a long-term commitment of all of us, no?
What is the experience of TAP? What is TAP doing in this regard?
Well, I think that because this is a cultural change, I think that the leaders, and in our case, mainly the women leaders, we need to ensure that this cultural change happen. So how to do this? I think that the cultural change needs to start in the early ages, right? But what we can do in TAP? Recruiting and retention. Because it's not only a question of recruiting. Retention is very important, because we see a lot of women leaving the industry career for some reasons that we can also discuss. But we need to put in place policies to improve women recruitment and also women retention.
Okay. Tanya, as a chairwoman of ANAC, what is for you the most important issue in terms of parity, gender parity, and aviation in general? We've seen these numbers, which are impressive, so we all notice that there's a change, but then we have 5% of women are pilots. Yes. So huge discrepancy between these kind of numbers. What do you think is the most important issue to be?
I think the first thing to say is to thank Portugal Air Summit for the organization of this panel, because for me, this is still a topic. And this is still a topic because if you take the baseline, and for me the baseline is the percentage of the world population that are women, and we have 50% of women in the world population, and they should be represented equally in general, in all sectors of the activity and in all levels of careers. And what we see in aviation is far from that. So even if in Portugal, and I do agree that in Portugal that is not a hot topic because we are here and we are not alone. In the aviation sector, women are very strongly represented in Portugal, but elsewhere in other geographies, especially, and in other timings, we can see the evolution. And even in Portugal, in some sectors and some subsectors of aviation, we are still very far from the 50%. You said some numbers. Pilots are one concern. ATCOs are another concern, because it is quite difficult to attract women to the profession, and a lot of work has been done. I'll let Alexandra talk about that later, probably. But there are still subsectors that where the issue is still very relevant. I can give you the example of ANAC, because ANAC is really unbalanced on the opposite way, because we have 47 workers are women, so women as workers, but in leadership positions, we have in general 61%. So we are above the average, and in top or level one directorship, we have 50%, but in second level leadership, we have 67%. So in the board, we are 2 women and 1 man. He's asking for a quota now. He's there somewhere. So
like me.
Yes.
In this panel.
So it is not an issue in ANAC, but we do recognize that it is an issue in other subsectors of the activity, and we think that there's something that could be done, but on that we have some ideas.
As a regulator, do you believe you have a role to play in this? Do you believe that you have, some kind of guiding light towards the rest of the sector and all the enterprises?
Not a guiding light, but we take that as part of our objectives and our mission, because ANAC has also the role to develop the sector, and development comes from creativity and innovation, and creativity and innovation are enlarged and bigger and stronger when you have diversity. It's not only gender parity, but diversity in general. But of course, representation of women is also important to bring that innovation, creativity, and representation of interests. If half of the population would be flying, then they should be deciding also in the sector. And so, for that purpose of the development of the sector, we do think that regulator has a role to play. It's not that we have been very active on that. There are other public institutions that take that on board much stronger than we do. But we are planning a few actions. The first one is to collect some data, because that's the first initiative that we need to have in order to make an evaluation of the situation. And we will start on that in Portugal, but ECAC, an European organization which we belong to, is going to do that the same for European in general. And of course, ICAO has taken on board also some initiatives, and we could see in the assembly that women were a very, very small part of the representatives. So after making the evaluation on the data, we do think that we have to impose a plan for ourselves and as a guidance to the sector, not binding, of course, because that's not our task.
As an example.
And then we have to deliver it. We have to establish concrete actions that will, of course, it's not, as I said, it's not a priority inside ANAC. We are quite well represented. But still, we think that some initiatives should be highlighted and underlined, even for political purposes. A lot of policies that involve the conciliation of life and work balance tend to promote gender parity. So we have general measures that go in that sense, and we have to put them in the same framework with others. Mentorship is quite important. We do believe that a good program in mentorship will help just breaking that glass ceiling that some women still have, that they are not even going to apply and go further because they are going to have kids or they have other priorities. So there are a few initiatives that we think that the regulator can take on board.
And kids leads me to the old question, the cultural question, maternity. Is it the issue here? Is it one of the things that prevents women from getting to the top? Alexandra.
I think that it's not a facilitator, let's say like that. In this type of panels, sometimes people ask me how do I do the conciliation of my professional and the personal life? And I always wonder why the moderator is asking me that to me, because I don't see in any panels with a lot of men that question popped up, right? It doesn't happen. So that's strange. Why? Nobody asks to my husband what does he do to make sure that he has a balance between professional and personal life. Because at the end of the day, society still looks at women with that specific role. And it is true, right? Because at the end of the day...
It exists.
Yeah, it
still
exists. And it exists, and it's true. Women need to take care of their child when a child is born. The question is how we as a society want to promote family, right? And make sure that men parents are also engaged on that, and that role is not only to the women. It still happens. I'm not going to promote that young lady because next year she just got married, etc. All those stereotypes, those type of things sometimes still happen in the organizations. I'm not going to promote her because then she will have a baby, she will be out of the company for a few months. Or I will not give to that woman the annual bonus or just a part of it.
Because she was off.
Because she was off part of the year. At the end of the day, after 10 years, that person will make less money just because of that. It cannot happen, right? And so I think that we as a society, in our organizations, we need to tackle that. We need to make sure that that balance between personal and professional life, it happens to men and to women. And of course, I fully agree with what Chloé said. At the end of the day, we are talking about gender, but most important is the skills and the level of competence that we have, right? It's just not to having women. The idea is to have the right skills, the right skill sets. And like Silvia and also Tanya were saying, if the society has this number of people, companies should have that level of representation. If it is age diversity, gender diversity, or whatever, right? So I think there are still a lot of stereotypes, and those stereotypes also start at a very young age. I was talking about when I was studying, right? Mostly men. At NAV, we still have a challenge with the number of women. There's a president that is a woman, but most of the directors are men.
That persists.
Yes, because it's engineers all over the place, right? So mostly men.
So the problem there starts before, starts in college.
Yes, if we want to recruit,
education.
For instance, in IT and technology, if we want to recruit today, resources are very, very scarce and are mostly men still. So this is something that we as a society, and I think that the government also has a role in those policies, we need to increase the base to make sure that this diversity can happen throughout the life cycle of the organizations.
Chloé, do you feel that in ANA Aeroports, do you feel that the opportunity exists nowadays for women, or exists recently, more opportunities exist than before? And opportunities is one of the key issues here, right? So not just apart from education also, but the opportunity for women to achieve a goal, achieve a position, achieve a job like a man.
Yeah, and I definitely think these opportunities exist. And I would say there are three key factors that promote this access to leadership responsibilities. One, which is to show examples in the organization or in the sector, and this is part of the deal to show that there's a way to occupy these kind of positions if you want to do it. Secondly, the work-life balance is clearly a topic. I fully agree with Alexandra that it shouldn't be a gender topic, and I'm not a strong feminist, but clearly it's a question of work-life organization.
Balance?
This has to be organized, and in ANA, I'm proud to say that we have a lot of schemes that allow to get the flexibility that is necessary to take care of children and not to give up on a family life just to progress in the career. Teleworking has been, remote working has been a big topic, and more generally, how we address the new expectations of the employees after crisis. I heard Raymond from IATA this morning say there was a new paradigm probably after COVID, with a more inclusive organization, more flexible organization. I fully agree with this. There are new expectations. The company has to accompany this. So work-life balance on many aspects has to be cared of, but not only for women, for all the ones that need it. And third, and this is probably a little bit more for women, we need to give the confidence to women to candidate for this kind of position. And sometimes there's a lack of self-confidence, a lack of feeling of legitimacy to go for this kind of position that come from very long ago, in the confidence that the teachers, the family gave to girls when they were younger. And to compensate maybe this lack of confidence, we need to accompany with training, with mentoring. I fully agree with Tanya that mentoring is part of the help we can give to feel more legitimate because we have the skills to go for these positions.
Silvia, how do we change this in terms of percentage of women in leadership positions? How do we change? Is a compensation a road to get there? Is it feasible? Does it make sense?
Well, I think that...
And what kind of compensation, of course?
Yes. I think that, and coming back to what Alexandra said about the question that everybody asks to women but not to men about the compensation between familiar and personal life. But they ask this question to the women and not to men because it's a reality. I mean, today, women or mothers dedicate more time to housework and childcare than the men. This is a reality. So it's a cultural change. And for this reason, we need to start before. So I have also always the doubt of, should we have rules or should we have objectives? Because when I am recruiting a person for my team, for instance, I need to recruit the best person for this position, independent if it's a woman or a man. But what happens? The situation that we have today is not balanced. So we need to help. We need to put some rules and measures to try to compensate this. So I think that is a good idea to have some objectives, like for instance, having 25% of senior position women, like for instance, in conference like this, this is a good example. And IATA is putting an objective of having 25% of speakers in the conference women also. So I think that we should have this type of measures to try to compensate or to balance the situation that we have today. Because
I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Yes.
But the lineup of people that you are going to hire or that recruit, most of them are men. So the issue comes from behind, right?
Yes, exactly. So, but now when you are looking for new positions, you can try to hire more women. But the problem is not only recruitment, because if you look at the career of women in aviation, 50% leave aviation industry in the middle of the career. And when you ask why, the reasons are lack of opportunities and also lack of flexibility to compensate what we were talking about, a balance between familiar life and work life. So we need to implement measures like flexibility, for instance, to work, things like home office that can help. And in terms of opportunities, we need to think that, of course, a woman can be a pilot, can be a technician in maintenance, and should have the same salary that a man. So we need still work a lot on all these initiatives. But as I said before, this is a cultural change, and the cultural change needs to start not only in the aviation, needs to change globally, and it needs to start in the schools, and needs to start at homes, because we need to change this, and we need to say to our daughters, our girls, that they can do the same job that a man can do.
And to your voice also.
And to their voice. Yes, because I have a son, I don't have a daughter. But yes, he needs to understand that this is the same. He can be a pilot, but also a girl can be a pilot.
And Tanya, you talked about quotas a little while ago in your last intervention, but picking up on compensation also, so 2 artificial ways to provide women the accessibility to top positions or to positions itself. Is this the right path for you? Do you believe that this is, if nothing is done, we'll stay in the same position for a long time, right? So there's not an evolution in society that per itself will work it out.
Okay. I think we all agree that this is not a capabilities problem. This is a cultural problem, and this cultural problem has several impacts. The psychological one, the glass ceiling that I was talking about, and Chloé touched on that also, that women think that they have a glass ceiling and that they cannot go up due to cultural reasons, due to the fact that they assume that they will be the ones that will be taking care of kids, etc. We have to break that ceiling. We have to say that, no, you have to find a way to balance things at home so that you can improve your career. And that, I think, is the psychological aspect, and that the mentorship, I think it's quite useful on that. But then we do have the skills part, and for the skills part, and even the cultural and the psychological one, we have to go back to school, like you were suggesting. We have to go to kindergarten. We have to make some mentorship to children to say that it's good to work in space industry if you are for. It's not only for boys. And gaming, it's not only for boys, because that's one of the reasons that, as I was told, many women fail in the tests as for ATCOs, because boys are more used to gaming. So this is really cultural. We have to go back. And in the STEMs area that Chloé was also talking about, like science, technology, engineering, and math, that's the core areas where gender imparity is bigger. So that's where we have to focus in general, the public authorities and the private entities to change the game, to show that it is fun, it is nice, you're capable of. So, and sometimes that's just opening horizons. And for artificial measures, my position is that we have to think them very carefully, because I don't like to be labeled as one artificial measures going up, because you do have the merit. The only thing that can help is that to get women into the game, because traditionally the game is closed. Because dinners are closed, they talk about football, they don't even, when they think about something that they need to hire, if it's not a contest, they won't think about a woman. And if they are obliged to think about a woman, that keeps or starts changing the game. But for me, those should be considered as sunset clauses. You should use them to enhance gender parity and to equal the balance between work life and private life between men and women. But then, if the result is achieved, and we are far from that, unfortunately, then rules should go down, and then the market should work freely, as in most countries in Europe, as in ANAC. We don't need quotas. We are above the quota. So you have to consider the specific reality of each situation, industry, profession. And the purpose, the final purpose, it means that it worked, is to have a sunset clause. They go down. It's not needed anymore, because there's gender parity. That's what we want to achieve.
Before we went to the panel, someone was saying, one of you, I don't remember who, told me that in the Euroc, next slide, it was you, Tanya, the percentage of women, of girls there, was very, very low. You don't have a percentage, or do you?
No, I just looked at the room.
So you just saw the room.
You just look at the room, it's quite...
You read the room. Exactly. So
impressive.
a very small percentage, and that goes to gaming, that goes to education.
Yeah.
So that
maybe they can think about saying that it should be important that a woman could be in the team, just to enhance. And in traineeships, for instance, in universities, just to say that, well, we won't train ships with this university, but X% should be women. So that's the kind of measures that we can think about. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem at all. Just to finish, because we have 5 minutes, under 5 minutes, a quick word from each of you. What are we supposed to expect in this regard for the next years? What is the most important thing that you believe should or will happen?
I believe that quotas are an accelerator. And because quotas are an accelerator, we will have more women in top position, and because of that, we will have more role models. That will have a cultural impact on our society, on the way our children see the world. And I also have boys, right? So they are used to see women progressing, right? I think that will have
That change starts at home with you? That
Sorry?
change starts at home with you?
Of course. They need to know that they don't need to help at home. They just need to do stuff. In general, women do stuff and men help. No, they don't help. They need to do. We don't need help. We need someone to do. Okay, so they are learning that. And I think also it's very important one thing. We all have our own hidden biases. It's human, right? We relate more with people that are similar to us, the people that dress the same way, that have the same background, etc., and etc. And I think it's also important for us to understand that when we are hiring, when we are promoting, when we are developing talent in our organizations, we need to be aware of our own biases, right? Hidden. I mean, no, I don't believe that any man in this room will say that, oh, I prefer to hire men, for sure. But at the end of the day, probably there are some hidden biases that we don't know,
that we
right?
don't realize.
That we don't realize, and they are there. So let's work, all of us, on our own, and make sure that our organizations are prepared to tackle those hidden
Chloé,
biases.
very quickly. Futurology a little bit and actions.
I think that quota can help, rules can help. I just want to mention that this morning I read information in the newspaper, it was in the French newspaper, about an Asian company, an Asian airline, that will stop firing the hostesses when they are on maternity leave. So that was apparently a big change for them. So obviously, since we are still talking about it, this has to stop from being a problem. But above this, I think we have to work on how to change the leadership for genderless challenges that we have. How do we expect to work with the flexibility that the employee wants, that the expectations on sustainability, the modernity that we must show, the empowerment of our employees? These are genderless topics, and we have to find the right leaders to bring forward this transformation.
Silvia.
I think that, just to summarize, this is a cultural change that is a long-term commitment. I hope to see in 2025 the objective of IATA, 25% women in senior position in aviation, and I think that the change should start in the early ages. So all we need to work together to see this change.
Tanya,
very quickly, the topic is on the table. I think more outreaching programs like this will happen. More concrete plans will be applied, and we are starting a virtual cycle, especially in Europe. And I think that we can really enhance so that the path is the same for the whole world, which is what we intend as women to be represented in society.
Tânia Cardoso Simões, chairwoman of ANAC, Silvia Mosquera González, member of the executive committee of TAP, Chloé Lapeyre, member of the executive committee of ANA, and Alexandra Reis, president of NAV Portugal. Thank you very much for your insightful information, and let's keep on tackling this subject more and more. I think is one of the issues is talk more about the things that we have to do, all of us, in terms of society. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Obrigado a todos.